To East Africa now, where 4 civil society groups are challenging the integrity of Kenyan presidential candidates Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto, who are facing charges at the International Criminal Court following the events of the post-election violence of 2007. Kenya's next presidential and parliamentary elections will be held on March 4th this year. The vote is expected to draw international scrutiny after communal bloodshed that followed a disputed 2007 ballot. Joining us now from our studios in Nairobi to assess political risk is Adams Oloo. He's a political analyst from the University of Nairobi. Mr. Oloo, thank you so much for joining us on Beyond Markets. Do you think that the efforts to bring... Thank you, sir. The efforts to bring these gentlemen to court, is it the use of the courts in an attempt to influence the political landscape, or is this a just, attempt to try and ensure that corrupt politicians or people that have been accused of violence and human rights violations do not participate in the elections in Kenya?
Well, I think that the civil society basically is trying to ensure that Chapter 6 of the new Constitution of Kenya that was promulgated in 2010 is adhered to. That is the chapter on leadership and integrity. But that chapter was very general and it was left to Parliament to legislate for it. But parliamentarians, being interested parties, ended up watering down that Chapter 6 on leadership and integrity. And therefore the civil society groups were forced to go to court. But even as we talk, as the court process goes on, both Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto have already been cleared by the Independent Electoral and Boundary Commission to run for the presidency and deputy presidency in the March 4 general election. My view is that most likely the courts will look at political expediency. I don't see the courts going out of its way to throw them out of the race, because that would politically kind of raise temperatures in the country.
Of course, you've just led me perfectly to the next question. Of course, the big thing is to get buy-in from all the parties and to not have the courts or the judiciary seen as interfering unnecessarily with the political processes down in, in Kenya. The supporters of Mr. Kenyatta and Mr. Ruto, are they likely to respect these decisions, whatever they may be, both of the court in Kenya and the ICC, or do you think that these actions will actually just increase tensions and the potential for violence?
Well, I think that you have to look at it from the view that both the ICC and the courts of Kenya and the electoral bodies have kind of tried to separate the political process and legal process. They have tried not to join the two to go hand in hand. And therefore, in fact, the ICC did indicate that the elections in Kenya was a Kenyan reason, and that all they were concerned with were the crimes against humanity. When you come back to the Kenyan populace, then you find that Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto have argued that even if they are charged with crimes against humanity, it is for Kenyans to judge them, and therefore they are saying that the courts should leave Kenyans to decide whether they want to elect an ICC suspect or not. And to that end, they have been very vocal to say that the international community should leave Kenyans to decide their own destiny. And I think as it stands now, it looks more likely that Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto will be on the ballot paper come March the 4th.
Now, the temperature in Kenya now, given all these developments, from where you're sitting, Mr. Oloo, what would you say is the prospect of a peaceful election? We know that the election was expected initially to be held in August. It's now been brought forward to March. Is everything in place? Are we going to see a relatively smooth, violence-free poll in Kenya?
Yeah, I want to be an optimist in this, because I think Kenya has come a long way since the 2007 and 2008 post-election violence. We have created new institutions or brought in fresh ideas of men and women of impeccable records We now have an independent electoral and boundary commission that has the trust of Kenyans and that was put in office through a competitive process where they were vetted by parliament before being appointed. We have a reformed judiciary that now has the trust of Kenyans and in fact is rated very highly among the institutions that is performing well. And therefore, any dispute in the election, I think the party or candidate disputing should not have a problem going to the courts, which is a total opposite of what happened in 2007. And lastly, although there has been some slow pace in the reforms in the police force, a new Inspector General and the deputies have been appointed, and the Constitution of Kenya 2010 does indicate that the Inspector General is not supposed to get instructions on her activities or operations except on policy issues. So if you look at in totality, you can say that we have a good infrastructure that will ensure a free and fair, and to that extent we hope that they'll be peaceful.